continue to surge. According to the CDC, California has had just shy of 53,000 cases in the last 7 days. Texas, almost 65,000. And Florida, more than 123,000.
Fox's Lauren Blanchard. A federal judge has temporarily blocked an order from Texas Governor Greg Abbott that allowed state troopers to stop vehicles they suspected could be carrying COVID-infected migrants and return them to the border. The Justice Department arguing the order swerved into immigration enforcement, which is a task of the federal government. There could be a big showdown brewing between the governor and a big city Texas mayor.
Houston city workers are being told they must resume wearing masks while on the job, but the requirement could contradict Governor Greg Abbott's most recent executive order banning such mandates. Mayor Sylvester Turner issued the mask mandate Monday. Last month, the governor repeated his executive order banning mask mandates by any state, county, or local government entity. The Houston mask mandate comes as COVID hospitalizations across the state continue to rise due to the Delta variant. Tom Rigotti, Fox News.
At the Summer Olympics in Tokyo, American sprinters Sydney McLaughlin and Dalilah Muhammad have both broken the old world record in the women's 400-meter hurdles. McLaughlin takes the gold medal. Muhammad gets the silver. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
A homeowner's policy protects much more than just your house. It also protects you against claims from someone being hurt on your property. If a visitor is injured at your place, how much are you covered for? The smart thing to do is get the answer today.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Hafaday, this is Congressman Sir Nicholas. Your congressional office would like to remind you that pandemic unemployment assistance is set to expire on September 6th of this year. We encourage the people of Guam to seek out active employment as much as possible, as jobs continue to remain limited, and we want to prevent hardship for our people at the conclusion of the PUA program. Thank you, and see to us, Mahasi.
This ad was paid for with official funds from the office of Congressman Michael F.Q. San Nicolas.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. If I've ever said anything in my whole life that's memorable, and I probably have, at least accidentally, that's got to be it. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's what we stand for here on Tall Tales, a constitutionally oriented, partially libertarian, mostly conservative talk show that invites audience participation by calling AAA Talk, by posting on Facebook. If you're part of our international radio listening audience, the country code for the United States, which includes Guam, is 1. Area code 671-888-8255. And if you call that number, the best producer in the business, a gentleman named Jose Martinez, would be glad to take your call. So let's start out as we usually do. In fact, we always do with Zemi Ikotny. I had to roll up the cuffs of my trousers when I read this one this morning. Here's the title: Our View, Plans Needed for How to Address Chronic Flooding Problem on Guam. Guam is smack dab in the middle of Fanuchanan, which means a place for rain, a rainy season. Well, it does rain in Fanomnakan, as you were Fanomnakan, or the dry season. Those are two words I don't use very often. It's nothing compared to the deluges we experience in Fanuchanan when it rains. It really pours. And when the heavy rains come, it also floods. There are places across the island that routinely flood due to heavy rain, which poses problems for drivers, businesses, and homeowners. Just ask Malesu. They use the word Mauricio in the column here, in the editorial. Just ask Malesu Mayor Ernest Chatgaloff, who had to deal with yet another flooding crisis on Saturday. He says the government of Guam is to blame for the flooding because it fails to keep culverts clear. The mayor said Department of Public Works equipment was pre-positioned in the village to keep culverts clear of debris during heavy rains, but recently it was relocated from the Botsinus area, which is prone to flooding. If the excavator was there, the flooding in that area would have been averted. Chatgaloff said, there was fair warning. We need to stop being reactionary and be proactive. He's absolutely correct. The same areas across Guam flood every time there's a heavy downpour. Marine Corps Drive in Pidi, many parts of Malesu, Tuman, especially in the area near the Hyatt Regency Guam. This list goes on and on. So why is it that there haven't been any long-term solutions for areas that chronically flood? There doesn't even seem to be any discussion or plans for what can or needs to be done to fix or at least mitigate the problems, other than a plan to address Tumum flooding. The administration and the legislature need to bring mayors and agency officials together to clearly identify the problem areas and come up with short and long-term solutions. There should be some funding to address flooding in these areas, especially for roads that are paid for using federal funds. GovGuam's elected officials need to reach out to the federal. Need to reach out? Maybe they could just send them a letter. Federal Highway Administration, as well as the Army Corps of Engineers, FEMA, the Department of Interior, and the city and the Cincinnati Municipal Bowling Team that can assist Guam with our flooding problems. Okay.
Isn't the mayor's office a part of government of Guam?
Sort of, yeah.
We're not doing anything about it.
Yeah, because we're the mayors, right? And we know that nobody's going to take us on because all of the elected officials or those who owe their rice bowl to elected officials have known for a long time that mayors control a lot of votes in their villages. So if you do something to aggravate the mayors, it could cost you politically. That's conventional wisdom. I don't know that it's true. I think it may be true in some cases, not true in all in other cases, but it is conventional wisdom. And I've said so many times that politicians on Guam use state-of-the-art techniques for getting and holding supporters. It's called the 1972 playbook, which almost every politician has a dog-eared copy of. Then we turn to the Post. Guam households face enormous financial challenges ahead. Enormous financial challenges.
Just a step down from ginormous.
Yeah, and almost as big as supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, which aged out anti-disestablishmentarianism to be the longest word in the English language. Yeah. When Guam Power Authority received the Rate-Setting Public Utilities Commission green light to raise the fuel cost on power bills in 3 tiers from August 1 to December 1 this year, consumers had little time to react before the first increase went into effect. The first increase was approved last week. A few days later, on August 1, the first fuel surcharge increase went into effect, and it affected people immediately because the Power Authority sends out bills every single day. You get yours every day, to Jose?
Every day.
Every single day.
And I send it right back.
Yeah. If a household is paying $150 now for the fuel surcharge portion of its power bill, imagine having to budget 55% more of that each month when the fuel increase kicks in starting in December. Now, be careful. It's not 55% more of your whole bill, just the fuel surcharge. That's an extremely important distinction that I had to go into the other day with a caller named, what was his name? It was the same name as another caller that we entertain quite frequently. And it wasn't Carl. It'll come back to me. For households that are relying on the tourism and hospitality industries to return to pre-pandemic levels of work and pay, this latest addition to household bills is just one of the many economic survival issues to be concerned about. This is going to be a Guam-wide problem. Many Guam households have survived the economic woes brought on by this pandemic largely because of federally funded jobless program and economic impact payments and the governor's willingness to let GovGuam employees get paid while they stayed home. The jobless benefits will cease a month from now. The economic impact payments have gone almost dry. As the household cash reserve falls, the prices of some of the essentials continue to go up. In addition to the spike in the cost of power, gasoline prices, food prices, and the cost of sending kids to school in the coming school year will add to the strain on many Guamanian household budgets. For those who owe rent and are in danger of eviction, the moratorium that has cushioned them for more than a year is gone. Evictions and foreclosures resume starting July 1 for Guam. Across the nation, efforts to prolong the pause on evictions have gone unheard as landlords face financial pressure too. Well, hello. For renters who meet the government criteria for assistance to pay rent and utilities, GovGuam's Rent and Utilities Relief Program could offer some help. But as previously reported, applicants have had challenges submitting all the required paperwork. 2021 will be known as the year of paperwork. Less than $2 million was approved from the $36.6 million emergency rental assistance program because there were fewer applications received than expected for rent and utilities relief, officials said. For those who exhaust their approved aid from $33 million or fall out of the criteria for the program, ending up on the street could be a real possibility before our economy can catch up. This is not the first time we're bringing up the dire situation many of our households are in. But as we get word of more cost increases with less and less money to go around, our community does seem to be approaching a boiling point. It might be a matter of when we start seeing more families on the street or more households living without power or water. What we haven't heard are substantive discussions on how people will get the safety net they will need. The interesting thing is that we are heading into an election year. How politicians address the issue will be interesting to hear. Now, I mentioned this a couple days ago on Tall Tales. At the risk of sounding like a Democrat, I suggested a consideration of FDR's approach to folks who were up against it financially during the New Deal. And that was that we would use the government bureaucracy to create work, not jobs, but work for people. And my sense was this: we would get all of the people, all of the directors that have a construction capability, Public Works, Department of Corrections, PU, as you were, the Waterworks, the Power Authority, and I thought of a couple of others also, and get them together to put together a plan where they could mobilize large amounts of unskilled labor to accomplish the stuff that never gets done, you know, to make our roadsides look like something other than some kind of a botanical garden. To make sure that public buildings are, the outsides of public buildings are clean, etc. So my idea was this: if we could come up with the work, then we would have pickup points, 3 or 4 pickup points around the island. And the advertisement would say, hard work, low pay for people who want to earn money. And the pay would be the minimum wage, I think, which just went up to $9.50 an hour. And people would be encouraged to show up with the necessary papers, their driver's license, their ID, their social security number, whatever. And at these sites, they would be signed up to do government work. And the supervisory personnel from the agencies I just mentioned would supervise them in doing this unskilled work, cleaning up roadsides, etc. And for that, there'd be 8 hours work, 8 hours pay at the minimum wage. And that would be it. If people were only barely able to do the work, still okay. Now, the only part of my plan that's missing is where would the money come from? And my sense is this, that in order to make that work, in order to start doing that, we'd have to stop doing something else. And I've been very critical of the way this government spends money. So, you know, get out a sharp pencil and figure out how to do it. It's better than not doing anything at all. It at least looks like someone is trying to do something for people that need to make a little bit of money. It would not be open only to men. It'd be open to men and women. And I suppose if you wanted to be politically correct, you could say men, women, transgenders, whatever. And it would be a work program, not a jobs program, but a work program. And it'd be very clear up front that you can make minimum wage for 8 hours, but you got to work for it. And that's what FDR did during the Depression. He created the Civilian Conservation Corps, which was a quasi-military organization that put young men to work during forestry, improving parks, etc. And then he had the Works Progress Administration and the Public Works Administration, etc., that made that provided work for people that wanted to work. This is far better than the situation that the governor embraced at the beginning of the pandemic, where she saw no problem with paying people to stay home, government employees. So that's my 2 cents worth on that. Okay, I've got my blue pencil here, and today the Daily News did exactly what an editorial should do. It described a problem, it described a solution, and it placed blame. And it was readable, and it wasn't peppered with mistakes. So congratulations, PDN. There you go, PDN. And let's see, that's for the Daily News. That makes, they're all the way up to 62 blue stars now. Post is still ahead with 252. Candid's still got 4. Candid keeps working on it. For a while, I thought Candid was going to pass the Daily News because the Daily News dropped out of the competition for a long time. Once they got rid of those Gannett folks and stopped running boilerplate as though it were a real editorial, they started to get with the program. Okay, let's talk about today's card. I have even more Tall Tales versus Melvin Wanpat, which is a takeoff of Tall Tales versus Joe Titano 2. I've got Moylan versus the governor. I've got APL versus Matson. I've got the Pope versus Bessieux, Cardinal Bessieux. I've got TT, Tall Tales versus Rapinoe. Yeah, Megan Rapinoe. And I'm going to ask our producer here, Jose, if when I'm on that item in the card, Tall Tales versus Megan Rapinoe, if I seem to be lapsing into Schadenfreude, please say, hey, Bob, it's the S word, because it's going to be really hard to resist. In today's card, I said TT versus Rapinoe, Benetsu. Yeah, that's what you get. And then I've got Cuomo versus hypocrisy. Again, it's going to be really difficult to keep from lapsing into Schadenfreude here.
Good thing you have your pants rolled up.
Exactly. From the flood, right?
From the flood.
Yeah. And then I've got progressives versus us, the woke versus the English language, academia versus the folks. That's you and me and just, regular people that don't have PhDs behind our names. And then I've got eco-fascists versus freedom, a battle they continue to fight. But let's start out with Wanpat versus Tall Tales. And I have here, just by way of background, I have here the press release that was sent out by the Commission on Decolonization on their official letterhead. Commission on Decolonization, Office of the Governor. Now, there are supposedly 11 members of the Commission on Decolonization. The only ones whose name appears on this letterhead are Lourdes A. Longuero, the Magahagan Guahan, and Joshua F. Tenorio Segundo Maglahin Guahan. So they're ex officio members of the commission. None of the other commissioners are even mentioned on the letterhead. Yeah. Dice tanto este, no? So I think if you were to ask Melvin about this, Melvin Wampat, he'd say, pay no attention to those folks over there that call themselves commissioners. I run this commission. So this is what Melvin put out for immediate release on July 26th. And it says, in response to Robert Klitzkie's misleading, uninformed remarks before the Rotary Club of Guam, the Commission on Decolonization releases the following statement. The Commission releases a statement in response to Robert Klitzkie's misleading, uninformed remarks before the Rotary Club. So I'm somewhat flattered, you know. I really like talking. I really like speaking to the Rotary Club, any Rotary Club. I like Rotary. I was a Rotarian once myself in my younger days. It's a great outfit. I really like it. And it's always fun to go to their meetings and speak. They're a good audience, no doubt about it.
I'm a fan of Rotary sushi. Not the same thing.
Close, but no cigar, Jose. Yeah, so... and I think they pay attention to me when I'm there. As far as I can tell, they do. But, you know, even as a talk show host, I am completely familiar with being in charge of the Office of Unheeded Advice, especially when I attempt to give advice to the legislature. Now, let's take a short break, and I'll come back to that.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Starting August 1st, pandemic unemployment assistance claimants must start searching for work to remain eligible for PUA benefits. 3 work searches a week are required. Work searches include registering on HireGuam.com, meeting with employers, submitting resumes and applications, and attending job fairs. Only a few are exempt from the work search requirement. This includes those working reduced hours, those in training programs, and self-employed individuals. Remember, PUA ends September the 4th. Now is the time. Let's rebuild our workforce. For more information, go to dol.guam.gov.
We now return to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, soaring over the confusion with his superpowers of truth. Call 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Well, I'm off to a good start today. I'm just beginning the card, and I already have one of our prime callers on the line, a gentleman named Another Joe. So I see you there, Another Joe. It's going to take me a little while to get there, but I'm certainly anxious to entertain your comments on this part of the card. So as I said before the break, I'm really flattered when the commission, and I thought when I read this, wow, 11 members of the commission are coming out and saying, in response to Robert Klitzkie's misleading, uninformed remarks before the Rotary Club of Guam, the Commission on Decolonization releases the following statement. So at least somebody was paying attention to what I said. And this is how the release starts. Genuine decolonization is not about being a separatist, and Chamorro's self-determination is more than just a vote. Rebutting things that I never said, correcting errors that I never made, actually. Mr. Klitzkie is correct in his assertion that these two concepts are not synonymous. Well, I start right out getting something right. and then rather than going into any of the misleading or uninformed remarks I made, Melvin Wampat, who's actually the person that authored this, just goes into his own talking points. After saying that I was right about something, I suppose he figured he had license to go into his own talking points. And then he comes down to the last paragraph on the first page. Although Mr. Klitzkie may believe, so now we're doing a little bit of mind reading here, may believe he is unaffected by the very real consequences of being an unincorporated territory. The reality for the people of Guam is that we are second-class citizens living in a modern-day colony, being held back from achieving the full extent of our political, cultural, and economic developments. Well, actually, I said at the Rotary meeting, I said, you know, I pointed out that the Commission on Decolonization, if you read the whole title, it's not called the Commission on it's the Commission on Decolonization for the Self-Determination of the Chamorro people. So it's not decolonization for everybody. It's decolonization for one racial, ethnic group. And I pointed out to the Rotarians, all of us live in a colony. So if we're talking about decolonization, all of us should be concerned about it. Sorry, Melvin, reading my mind wouldn't have been as accurate as listening to what I said.
Maybe you're so tall he thought you were a windmill.
Well, he kept tilting at me, so it's very possible, yeah. He probably thought I was a dragon. Yeah. So, and then we go on to living in a modern day colony. He uses, of course, the second-class citizen shibboleth, which has been, I've rebutted a million times here. If you are a United States citizen, you are a United States citizen everywhere, all the time, for your entire life, unless you decide to go to the consulate of the United States somewhere, and that, of course, has to be in a foreign country, fill out some papers, and renounce your U.S. citizenship. Otherwise, you are a complete citizen. Now, I have put a little bit of a finer point on it than that and pointed out that the inheritance tax laws of the United States do treat people in the Marianas more favorably than those of us who were born in the mainland. If you were born on Guam or in the CNMI, when you pass away, your heirs will not have to pay federal and state tax, federal death taxes, on any of the assets you own anywhere in the world except the 50 states. For me, when I pass away, my heirs will have to pay federal estate tax on any assets I have anywhere in the world. So I'm a second-class citizen in respect to that. Sorry, Melvin. Hate to burst your balloon. And then, of course, when it comes to the Northern Marianas, I'm a third-class citizen because I can't own fee title to real property in the Northern Marianas. Only people of Northern Marianas descent can own fee title to real property in the Northern Marianas. That means Chamorros or Carolinians. And ironically, that reason that passes constitutional muster is because of the insular cases. If it weren't for the insular cases, that wouldn't work. And then if we want to talk about classes of citizens, before the settlement in the Chamorro Land Trust case, I was not eligible to be a lessee of Chamorro Land Trust land either because I'm the wrong color. I'm not Chamorro. Talk about second-class citizens on an island where I've lived almost all of my adult life. And then when you come right down to the real nitty-gritty, you know, about what any society is about, it's voting. And this plebiscite that everybody talked about for years and years and years, if it had ever come off, I would not have been able to vote. Once again, because I'm not Chamorro. I'm not the right color. If I presented my white card at the registry, they would not have accommodated me. And, you know, this kind of colors my attitude toward the whole thing. The whole idea of Chamorro separation and independent chamocracy, government of Chamorros, for Chamorros, by Chamorros. Where would those of us who don't fit into that paradigm, where would we come out? Nobody's talking about it. But when the democracy that we have right now says, you guys can't vote. I don't get a comfortable feeling out of the idea of an independent Guam. Anyhow, Mr. Klitzkie may believe he's unaffected by the real consequences of being an unincorporated territory. Mr. Wonpat may think he knows what he's talking about when he's referring to me and the remarks I made at the Rotary Club, but obviously he doesn't. Then he goes on to say, we continue to bear the inequity of our political status and the territorial clause in the Insular cases, which determined that only certain parts of the Constitution would be extended to the citizens of the territories, which now is a dead letter because the Organic Act, when it was first passed, had provisions that were mere images of the Bill of Rights. In 1968, the Mink Amendment to the Elected Governor Law said to the extent that they didn't apply before, the Bill of Rights apply now. So this is a classic case of a straw man that Melvin gets his stick out and beats the hell out of every time he gets a chance. He goes on to say the Jones Act, which unfairly raises the cost of goods in territories to protect U.S. shipping interests, it is applicable for any intercoast-wide shipping, U.S. to Guam, Guam to U.S., Louisiana to New York. It's everywhere in the United States. So the only way that Guam could get out from under the Jones Act, short of Congress repealing it or giving us an exemption, would be if Guam were independent. Then no more Jones Act. And of course, Congress has very generously given us an exemption. That is that cargo coming to Guam from American ports does not have to travel in American-built ships. It can come in foreign ships. And then it has also given APL the green light to serve in the maritime and the MSP program, and allowed APL one of the 60 foreign-built ship slots in that lash-up. But of course, that's not as much fun as saying the Jones Act, second-class citizens. And then Wonpat says, our lack of voice in negotiations that affect us as the compacts of free association. Well, once again, the only time we can have voice in those kinds of negotiations, like the freely associated states or an agreement with Japan, is if we're independent. And of course, I never talk about this commission without branding it what it really is. It's the Chamorro Commission for Separatism. Independence. The other two so-called options are a couple of straw men, statehood and free association. And then he goes on with some rhetorical questions that I don't think I need to bore you with, and some more boilerplate. So in the process of setting the public straight on the misleading, uninformed remarks of Robert Klitzkie, Melvin Wonpat just came along with his own misleading, erroneous, uninformed remarks, and hardly touched on what I told the Rotary. So when I saw that, I was wondering, when I looked at the letterhead, no members of the commission. Wonpat said he did it all. Wonpat came out with it. So I sent a Freedom of Information Act request, a Sunshine Law demand, not a request, a demand, asking for the call, notice, and minutes of the meeting wherein the commission approved the text and authorized the transmittal of the press release, which was the subject of the PNC News article of July 26. It would seem that if the commission is going to do that, they would have a properly called and noticed meeting. that they would keep minutes of it, etc. Well, this is what I got back. Relative to the Commission on Decolonization's response to a news article published in the Pacific Daily News, requested, and it sets out what I just said, provided from PNC News reporter Don Solat, requesting a comment from the three task forces in response to Mr. Klitzkie's remarks on decolonization at the Rotary Club. 2, request for responses from, they've given me that, and then also request the responses from the Commission on Decolonization's Natasha Suba, the task force member. So Natasha Suba works for the Commission on Decolonization. Now, you know, a local tradition is that whenever you see a name, oh yeah, that's his brother-in-law's second cousin's boss's third aunt, twice removed on his grandfather's side. So they're related. I don't do that, but there aren't very many Subas on the island, are there? Yeah. Okay, now, that was what was requested, and then I told you what was provided, and then the next column says notes/justification. And it says this: no meeting was called for the formulation of a response. No meeting was called.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah. So this letter from the Commission on Decolonization isn't from the Commission on Decolonization at all. So I wonder who it's from. The guy that hangs around out in front of the studio every day?
Could be.
So then Natasha Suba, who is a program coordinator for the commission, polled the three members of the commission from the various task forces. This gets better as we go along. Half a day, decolonization task forces. This is Don Sulat. This is Don Sulat with Pacific News Center. I attended a talk that was held by the Rotary Club of Guam, which had former Senator Robert Klitzkie give his 2 cents in regards to self-determination. So sort of a devaluation of my remarks, I think.
You gave a wealth of information.
Yeah, well, I thought it was at least a nickel's worth. Right? In regards to self-determination and critical race theory, his comments will be on the air tonight, and I will go further in depth momentarily. I am asking if a representative from all three task forces can give a comment on Klitzkie's statement saying, quote, to the separatists, we make noise that we got 3 choices: independence, free association, and statehood. The choice that I favor is the one we got right now. We got a really good way of life here. We don't pay federal income tax. We have local self-government. We haven't used all of what we have. We can have our own tax law if we wanted. We can have our own constitution if we wanted. But the separatists want it ending, pretty much putting the skids under that. So you heard what the reporter thought I said, and then you heard Melvin Wanpat's rebuttal to what I didn't say. Okay, and then here are the responses. And he says, I will be working with you soon. And we've got Michael Lujan Bavacqua of the Independence Task Force. Half a day, Natasha. I just spoke to Adrian, and he's suggesting the Commission on Self-Determination should respond rather than any individual messages from the task force. I think that would probably be best. So, suspicions confirmed. Melvin Wanpat is the cat's paw for Michael Lujan Bavacqua. Dewey John Huffer of the Statehood Task Force said, "I agree," with a smile, a colon and a couple of parentheses. And then let's see. I think that's it. Nobody from statehood. Yeah. So very interesting. Now, I also asked for the email addresses of all of the commissioners. So a little known fact is who's on the commission. And number one is the Honorable Lourdes A. Languero, the chairwoman. Honorable Therese M. Tetlahi, who is the Speaker's appointee. She appointed herself. Honorable Talina C. Nelson, who was the oversight chairman of this commission. Christopher M. Duenas, minority representative. Now, I wonder if what Juan Pat said properly reflects the thoughts of Christopher M. Duenas, the minority of the legislature rep. Honorable Edward Duenas, Statehood Task Force. Michael L. Bavacqua, Ph.D., Independence Task Force. Adrian P. Cruz, Free Association Task Force. You remember Adrian P. Cruz is the Deputy Director of Agriculture, who's also on the Cannabis Commission, and set himself forward as a real expert on manure. So I don't know if that makes him an ex officio member of the Commission on Self-Determination. Anyhow, then we have Marie Therese F. Cruz, Ph.D., member at large. Sean Tay A. Kitito, 33rd Guam Youth Congress representative. I guess she's a holdover since we're now, I don't know the number, maybe it is the 33rd. They don't follow the same numbers as the regular. Then we have the Mayor's Council appointee is vacant, another vacant member at large, and then we have Victoria Lola Leon Guerrero, who is the Independence Task Force alternate, and Dewey Huffer, the Statehood Task Force alternate. So, yeah, that's right. Dewey Huffer then apparently spoke up instead of Eddie Duenas. Okay, so let's take a short break here, and I'm about to finish this up, and lend an ear to Mark, a caller who wants to make his mark, and another Joe.
Mescla, read all about it. Check out Mescla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Tuman for lunch. Serving up some savory seafood specials such as spicy garlic shrimp, candied salmon, or better yet, the local favorite, snapper or shrimp escabeche. Available only during lunch hours. Make sure to come down and try these tasty specials and more. Call 969-2652 for more info or to make a reservation. Located at the Grand Plaza Hotel in Tuman, Mescla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. A true taste of Guam.
Looking for a seamless medical trip to Manila? St. Luke's Medical Center's Pacific Islands Medical Referral Package offers a convenient end-to-end medical travel service to St. Luke's Global City. With the package, they also provide assistance in the processing of your air travel requirements, airport to hospital transportation, and hospital room upgrades, all for free. To learn more, call Phil MD at 671-637-5433 or visit their office in Tumuning across the Baltej at St. Luke's. We love life.
Okay, so here we are back again. Juan Pat versus Tall Tales. Not the Commission on Self-Determination or the Commission on Chamorro Independence or whatever it wants to call itself, whatever euphemism it's using today. It's not the commission, it's just Melvin Juan Pat all by himself.
It's the commish.
Yeah, yeah. So the interesting thing about this is that he did respond, and it was a good response to a sunshine request, unlike some of the government agencies who see it as a game, to try to be as misleading as possible, as dilatory as possible, whatever. So the good news for the commission is it's a good sunshine law request. The bad news for the commission is that it is a confession on the part of members of the commission that they violated the open government law. And we saw this before with the CCU, Consolidated Commission on Utilities. You can't poll the members. Members don't talk to one another about commission business. You only do commission business in a properly called and noticed meeting. So when Suba, what's her name again? Natasha Suba, I would be very surprised if she did this on her own hook. I suspect that Melvin Wanpat said, ask the three commissioners, those three commissioners, if they want to make statements. So that interaction is a violation of the open government law. But I suspect that there's an affirmative defense to this violation of the open government law. Well, it's about self-determination. So it's about Chamorro self-determination, which trumps every other card in the deck. We have 52 cards in the deck, the highest of which are aces, right? Yeah, well, if you really understand cards, you know that that's not the highest card. The highest card is the Joker. So Melvin, the Joker, Wanpat, thinks that it's okay for him to to ultra-virus speak on behalf of the commission when he didn't have a charter to do that. And then he thinks it's okay to lure three members of the commission into breaking the open government law. So I got this about 9 o'clock this morning. I didn't have a chance to move on to the next step, which I will do tomorrow. I will load the nasty letter software into my desktop and fire off a notice of violation to the commission, telling them that they are in violation of the open government law. Now, one of the downside risks of violating the open government law is that any action you took is void. So I suppose Melvin Wanpat is going to have to figure out some way of eating his words. I have a feeling that this will not be the number one thing on his list. And then, of course, the commission is complicit here because three of its members were involved. One wonders what remedial action they'll take with respect to Mr. Wanpat's ultra-virus taking it upon himself to do their thinking for them, just like he did my thinking for me in the release. Yeah, remember he said, although Mr. Klitzkie may believe he's unaffected by the very real consequences of being an unincorporated territory. So if you got Melvin Wanpat, you don't need a commission. You don't need a Robert Klitzkie. He can speak for all of them. So, I guess I could have done something else for lunch at the day that I went down to the Rotary Club.
Rotary sushi.
Yeah, I could have gone for Rotary sushi. And Melvin Wanpat could have told the Rotarians exactly what was on my mind, even though I might not have known that myself. So, yeah, this whole commission on Chamorro independence is a boondoggle at best. If we're going to let one guy make all the decisions and do all the speaking, then we don't need to be paying stipends, $50 per meeting, to the rest of them. We'll just give Mr. Wonpat a different title and let him do it for everybody. And I suppose, no, I don't think this would work. I was thinking, maybe he could come in and do Tall Tales for me. But I got a feeling that the tailgaters would not go along with that for very long. Let's break for the halftime show, and we'll come back to another Joe and the caller who wants to make his mark.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Diving and seeing our coral reef full of life.
I really love hiking the trails.
I really love going to the beach. The sunsets are amazing.
Your island needs you. Help preserve what makes our island home. Stop those who threaten our wildlife, plants, and environment. Install the free TOCA app and report poaching, littering, burning, and other environmental crimes. Call 864-TOCA or install the free TOCA app today. This public service announcement is brought to you by the Department of Agriculture, UOGC Grant, and Choice Broadcasting.
Linda Schmidt of Fox 5 in New York. Despite the investigators' report, the governor still defiant.
For those who are using this moment to score political points or seek publicity or personal gain, I say they actually discredit the legitimate sexual harassment victims that the law was designed to protect.
The governor says the things he's accused of doing just did not happen. President Biden pushing coronavirus vaccines again at the White House yesterday, saying the Delta variant is just too easily spread.
It's highly transmissible, and it's causing a new wave of cases. It accounts for over 80% of all COVID-19 cases in the United States today. Experts tell us that we're going to see these cases rise in the weeks ahead.
Just 3 days after it expired, the eviction moratorium has been reinstated in most of the country by the Centers for Disease Control. For another 60 days, it is likely to trigger another court challenge from landlords. A federal judge has told the state of Texas to stop pulling over vehicles which they suspect may be carrying COVID-infected migrants. America is listening to Fox News.
Mescla, read all about it. Check out Mescla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Tucumán for lunch. Serving up some savory seafood specials such as spicy garlic shrimp, candied salmon, or better yet, the local favorite, snapper or shrimp escabeche. Available only during lunch hours. Make sure to come down and try these tasty specials and more. Call 969-2652 for more info or to make a reservation. Located at the Grand Plaza Hotel in Tucumán, Mescla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. A true taste of Guam.
Looking for a seamless medical trip to Manila? St. Luke's Medical Center's Pacific Islands Medical Referral Package offers a convenient end-to-end medical travel service to St. Luke's Global City. With the package, they also provide assistance in the processing of your air travel requirements, airport to hospital transportation, and hospital room upgrades, all for free. To learn more, call Phil MD at 671-637-5433 or visit their office in Tamuning across the Baltej at St. Luke's. We love life.
The investigation continues into the stabbing death of a Pentagon police officer at the facility's transit center yesterday. The attacker, a one-time Marine recruit, was killed by other officers. The motive not clear yet.
Tuesday's incident outside one of the most secure places in the country is the latest on a growing list across the United States. In Washington, D.C., violent crime is bringing tensions between the police department and city council to a head. D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser proposed spending an emergency $11 million to hire an additional 170 police officers, just months after the city council voted to strip $15 million from the department. Democratic City Council Chairman Phil Mendelson telling Fox News in a statement, the solution can't solely be more police. If you think about it, relying only on police is a reactive strategy.
Fox's David Spunt. A special election Tuesday in Ohio to pick candidates to fill 2 vacant congressional seats. In the state's 15th congressional district outside Columbus, coal industry lobbyist Mike Carey won the Republican nomination to replace Congressman Steve Stivers. He had the support of former President Trump. Bill Gates' divorce from his wife Melinda has been finalized. Both parties signing dissolution papers in Seattle yesterday, ending a 27-year marriage. The court documents do not detail how they'll divide the couple's fortunes. Food shortages in North Korea are reportedly getting worse.
South Korean lawmakers say intelligence agents believe North Korea has begun releasing emergency rice reserves, stocks that are normally kept for wartime. The country is reportedly facing a shortage of food. It's been blamed partly on severe weather, including an ongoing heat wave and drought. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has admitted there is what he called a tense situation.
Fox's Simon Owen, and I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
We buy a homeowner's policy and never give it another thought until something happens. Life brings changes, and our coverage needs can change. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Need to finish the job or start one the right way? Get the right stuff at East West Rental Center. You can switch to easy mode using industrial strength equipment. With years of experience helping builders, East West Rental gives you exactly what you need. Tools for landscaping, concrete, lifts, trucks, tables, tents, chairs, water blasters, excavators, forklifts, air compressors, and more. Call East West Rental Center at 646-1463 or visit them in Upper Tumont. Open Monday to Saturday from 7 to 5, Sundays 8 to 5.
Okay, so here we are back on Tall Tales after another exciting halftime show. And we are now in the second half of Tall Tales. I had a caller who wanted to make his mark on the line, but he rang off. I suspect that he didn't want to hang on during the halftime show. Maybe he'll call back. I just want to go through some of the the Facebook comments here, and then I'll get to another Joe. Let's see. Peter Santos, those are words my grandparents never used. Modern invention tomorrow. I think he's talking about the words for the rainy season and the dry season. Yeah. Yeah, well, that's you know, this is something that a certain element of the separatists do in the process of creating what they call nationhood. So, you know, why would you want to use the colonizers' terms, rainy season and dry season, when you could come up with some snappy Chamorro terms and gaslight everybody into thinking, well, we've always, you know, Chamorros have always used these terms, when of course they haven't. And then we've got going on down here a little bit. Pamela Duvall has been pretty consistent here. Every resident who is able to vote should be allowed to vote, period. And Colin Clark is here. And then I wonder if Colin Clark has been able to use Tall Tales as a proper screening device to avoid members of the opposite sex that are obviously not going to be very compatible with his lifestyle. Then we've got Gene Nettie. Mr. Bob, do you know what leading Chamorro business people think of all this talk from the commission of Mr. Wanpat? Also, if a small percentage of Guam represents their group, why spend your precious time on their nonsense? The squeaky wheel? Well, I appreciate the education from Tall Tales. Yeah, I think I have to spend time on it because, as I've pointed out before, the separatists embrace the tactics of critical race theory, and they're advancing their proposition. And while mature folks like business people have a little stake in the island, like business folks, etc., and the more mature amongst us are not taken in by it. There's a younger generation for which it has a certain amount of appeal, especially since we started the what's the word I'm looking for here? The Irredenta movement here on Guam. The Irredentists, and that has nothing to do with your teeth, those who would go for Chamorro Irredenta have to rename everything on the island and give it a Chamorro name, regardless of how much it might cost a businessman to change the name of the street on which his address is located. But let's rename everything. And then Laura Sauter said we have to come up with a new orthography. We can't use the old Spanish orthography because it's part of nation building. If we're going to be a nation, we have to have our own orthography. The whole cultural renaissance, so to speak, that began in 1987 when Frank Rabone invented some dances that a lot of the folks who perform the dances think have historical roots, but with Frank Rabone admitted came from places like New Zealand, Hawaii, Tonga maybe, etc. And they are now passed off as cultural dances. The whole thing with the dancing, the blowing on the seashell, the chanting, etc., as far as I know, has no pre-Hispanic roots whatsoever. But we now have a lot of younger folks who do it who think they are doing something to preserve the Chamorro culture. So I suspect that there are younger folks who are susceptible to the critical race theory tactics used by the separatists who would sign up and say, yeah, Guam ought to be an independent country. That way we could send our own team to the Olympics. Wait a minute, we do send our own teams to the Olympics. Anyhow.
Well, there's another important reason why we have to talk about this.
Okay.
It's about you.
About me?
It's about you.
Okay.
They wrote the letter about you.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. As modest, self-effacing, and proud of my humility as I am, when you write a letter about me, what am I supposed to do? Say, when they get it all wrong, say, well, yeah, you said that, but I really didn't want to say anything. So here we are. Mark is back online. We've got another Joe, so I'm going to go to another Joe and then to Mark. And another Joe, why do you want to talk about eviction when we're talking about self-determination, Melvin Borja, gaslighting, me, etc.?
No, Gordon, that's just when I started waiting. You're talking about the thing about evictions and the tenants being used somewhere that they started doing.
You want to talk about the Commission on Chamorro Independence?
Sure, let's do that.
Go ahead.
So, it seems like we're repeating ourselves over and over again. At any given point in time, the perspective seems to shift. If they had, and you had different perspective on it. My point of view at first was they should have just let Dave Davis vote. It's one guy. When you're saying, no, the clerk was following protocol because the rules for voting, this and that, and then of course there's this is I think under the governor's office, Eddie Bozacabo. I could be wrong about that, but he was governor at the time when this was starting, so he could have weighed in. He said, one guy, do the math, right? One guy can let him vote. But since then, we got this whole thing about being constitutional and racist and all sorts of things.
There's something I think you don't understand, another Joe, and that is that Dave Davis went to register fully expecting to not be allowed to register and fully embracing the fact that he wasn't, because as it turned out, this is how he had standing to file suit. You'll recall that Judge Francis Gatewood bought into the government of Guam's argument that the matter was not ripe because no plebiscite had ever been scheduled and it didn't look like anyone would ever be scheduled. And also, she determined that that kind of plebiscite was not a vote as contemplated by the 15th Amendment in the Voting Rights Act. The case went to the Ninth Circuit, and Judge, what is his name? His name will come back to me in a second. Wrote the majority opinion saying when Dave Davis was denied the right to sign up for the plebiscite, he was injured and he had standing from that point on. And that's exactly what he wanted. He wanted to have standing to raise the issue. People, I think, don't understand that. There's a case called Griswold versus Connecticut, that perhaps one of the worst cases the Supreme Court ever decided, that challenged a New Jersey, a Connecticut law that criminalized the use of birth control devices by married people. And Griswold attempted to raise that issue before, and in a case called Poe versus Ullman, the United States Supreme Court said, we're not going to hear this. That law has been on the books forever, and there's never been a prosecution under it. So although it's there and it's facially unconstitutional, we're not going to hear it. So Griswold and her allies went back and figured out a way that by teaching about birth control, artificial birth control for married people, they would be arrested. And it's probably a put-up job. They probably even had allies in the sheriff's department or whoever did the arrest. So they had challenged to raise the issue, went all the way to the Supreme Court, and in a very famous finding by Mr. Justice Douglas, the right of privacy was found in the U.S. Constitution. Although you could do a search and replace, and the best software in the world could never find it, Douglas said, well, it's there. It's in the emanations and penumbras of the Bill of Rights. And that right of privacy that he found in that case was the threshold for overruling Bowers versus Hardwick, which dealt with homosexuals, and for the Obergefell case, which said that that it would be unconstitutional to prohibit Herman from marrying Henry just because they're the same sex. So that's what Davis was after. So, you know, letting Davis vote would not have been the proper way to go about that, Another Joe. Davis did everybody a service, including the separatists, because as I've pointed out before, they didn't advance the theories that they want to tell everybody about, that the Chamorro people were colonized, that they never had a chance for self-determination, that they have this right of self-determination, that they're an identifiable, distinct group that ought to have certain group rights. They didn't do any of that stuff. They just tried to finesse it, and when they got to the Ninth Circuit, they lost. So Dave Davis was one who wanted to bring about an answer to a question that the separatists should have been just as happy to get as Dave Davis was. That's how the court system works. So,
interesting. But didn't you say we were a colony because we had self-determination and we had determined that we wanted to become a territory of the United States, thereby at that point we become a colony. That's where we become a territory.
Well, you know, I think a solid argument could be made that in 1948 and 1950, the Chamorros did exercise self-determination, and they opted to become United States citizens living in an unincorporated territory. Now, if I ever had a chance to pose questions to Melvin Wonpat, other than what he thinks my thought processes are, I would ask him, what would happen, hypothetically, if we had the plebiscite and the vast majority of Chamorros said, we don't want any of your three straw man choices. We want to stay the way we are. Would that have to be ignored in the name of decolonization? Because, you know, they avoid that question like, you know, a bad case of chicken pox. They don't want to talk about that at all. And my own suspicion is, my own feelings, my own sensing here of the population is that the vast majority of Chamorros are pretty satisfied with the way things are. I'm not talking about today's governor or this legislature or whatever, but our local home rule, our independence from federal constraints, with some exceptions, the fact that we do have a non-voting delegate who's apparently pretty powerful because he got the earned income tax cashback reimbursement through the Congress. So, but they don't want to talk about that. They want to talk about independence. And you notice from the FOIA, when Michael Lujan Bavacqua weighed in as to how it should be handled, that was it for the commission being named Melvin Wonpat.
Hey, thanks for answering. Okay, Bob, are you going to talk about the future regarding Moylan having something to do with, was it against the, was it Moylan versus, what did you say it was again on the card?
It's Moylan versus the governor. It gets into the governor's ability to spend without legislative appropriation pursuing to Wong versus Camino. That's the next item on the card, Another Joe.
Future question would be, do you think that's lacking checks and balances? Or...
Well, it's the next item on the card. I think it's the next item on the card.
I'll keep listening. Thanks for your time, Bob.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, and then we've got a caller here that always makes his mark when he calls in to Tall Tales. Go for it, Mark.
Uncle Bob. First off, Rotary. I liked Rotary Sushi when they had the Rotary Barbecue, the yakiniku place where you had the hot plate in the middle of the table and you could cook your own food and stuff. But that's gone away, so I don't go to Rotary Sushi anymore. Okay, the first thing I wanted to ask was, if back in 1977 and we had the Constitutional Convention and Congress approved our Constitution, and if we did approve the vote, would we be in the situation right now still talking about decolonization, or would that have been settled?
Well, ironically, the separatists urged everybody to vote to not approve the Constitution, because their argument was, how can we have a Constitution until we know what our political status is going to be? So having our own Constitution would have solved a multitude of problems. And if you're really serious about statehood, the first thing you got to have if you want to be a state is you have to have a Constitution that would be acceptable to the Congress. So we had that mechanism in place, but the separatists, of course, don't want statehood. They want independence, so they put the skids under it, and it didn't pass. And since that time, commentators have said, well, you know, if we had our own Constitution, it would weaken our quest for Chamorro self-determination.
Oh, okay. Now I was only in high school back then, and I don't remember everything. Actually, in fact, in '77, I was in high school back in California, so that's why I really don't remember this whole thing. But can you tell me who were the politicians at the time? Who were the separatists? I have no recollection of that. I remember Carl Gutierrez was pro-Constitution because he was the one really pushing it. But who was the other side?
Carl Gutierrez was the chairman of the Constitutional, the chairman of the Constitutional Convention, so he had a big stake in it. Guys like Robert Underwood, I think Marilyn Manabusan, and a few other names that, you know, have escaped my always slippery memory. But they all identified with the separatist movement. Benedunka. There was a group at the time called OPIR, with the answer or the name of or the spelling out of which I don't remember. And there was another group, both of which were separatist groups, both of which came out against the Constitution.
Okay. Now, so I've asked you this question before. Would it be possible to revive the Constitution, go back to Congress and say, hey, can you reapprove this or re-ratify this and send it back to us and we'll have a vote on it?
The statute is silent on that matter. You could read it a couple ways. One, that it was a one-shot deal. You take a shot at it, and if it works, fine, and then it's over. The other way to read it is, you know, that the enabling legislation is permanent, and we could keep working on a Constitution until we get it right.
Okay. All right. Thanks for all the info, Uncle Bob. We'll be listening.
Always good to talk to you, Mark. Thanks for calling.
Take care.
Yeah. This Commission on Decolonization, the Commission on Chamorro Independence, quite an undertaking. So probably tomorrow I'll be back on this, telling you about my notice of violation to the Commission for violating the open government law. Next on the card, I've got Moylan versus the governor. And he says, Dear Congressman San Nicolas. And after Congressman San Nicolas, he has a semicolon. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. The rule is that if it's a friendly letter, it would be Dear Congressman San Nicolas, comma. If it's a business letter, it would be a colon. So I guess maybe Moylan couldn't decide. A semicolon is half a colon and a comma. So, you know, I guess you could read it either way.
It's equity.
It's equity. He says, with over $600 million in federal relief funds currently on island, along with the millions of additional dollars which Guam received in 2020 due to the pandemic, it is appearing that for transparency and checks and balances purposes, that the archaic language in the Organic Act regarding the authority over local appropriation of federal dollars provided to Guam should be amended. Presently, this authority is granted to the governor of Guam. However, it's becoming evidently clear that legislative involvement is also needed. I suppose we've got to work the insular cases in there somewhere, right? Several state legislatures have been involved with the spending of their respective states' ARP funds. The 36th Guam legislature has been requesting the Leon Guerrero administration for a spending plan, and here we are in August with the budget discussion period upon us, and the administration has failed to provide any fiscal information with the federal monies. Okay, let's head for Wrigley in the seventh inning stretch, and we'll come back to Jim and the governor.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at GuamTraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Starting August 1st, pandemic unemployment assistance claimants must start searching for work to remain eligible for PUA benefits. 3 work searches a week are required. Work searches include registering on HireGuam.com, meeting with employers, submitting resumes and applications, and attending job fairs. Only a few are exempt from the work search requirement. This includes those working reduced hours, those in training programs, and self-employed individuals. Remember, PUA ends September the 4th. Now is the time. Let's rebuild our workforce. For more information, go to dol.guam.gov.
Okay, so here we are back to Moylan's letter to St. Nicholas. The next point he makes is so important, he makes it a triple run-on sentence. But who cares about stuff like that, right? The 36th Guam legislature has been requesting the Leon Guerrero administration for a spending plan, 1. And here we are in August with the budget discussion upon us, 2. And the administration has failed to provide any fiscal information with federal monies, 3. Good going, Jim. The legislature has also presented the governor with a proposed plan at the request of the governor on how to spend the ARP funds, but that process seemed to have been ceremonial at best. We were as cooperative as we could be when we met at the governor's closed-door meeting, which was not held at her beach in Inalahan. And as I was warned by the host of Tall Tales, we were played. Jim didn't say that, but he should. Yeah, I told Jim, you guys were played. You know, she sucked you into a closed-door meeting, which you should never do. And then she had you guys lay out show your hole cards, right? And then she held back on hers. So now she, you know, it's kind of like, you know, the quarterback in the football game bends down behind the center and says, I'm going to run a 22 spin right through the center of the line. For some reason, the play goes nowhere. Yeah, nice going, especially Republicans. I would expect that from Democrats, but I had higher hopes for Republicans. Silly me. Okay, then Jim goes on and quotes some statutory provisions. 48 U.S.C. 1423 J.A. Appropriations, except as otherwise provided in this chapter, and except as such appropriations as shall be made from time to time by the Congress of the United States, shall be made by the legislature. The language has existed since 1950, and it's possible that the intent at the time from Congress was to assure that the naval governor held authority over how federal funds would be appropriated on the island. Well, Jim, there was no naval governor after the Organic Act. Study your Guam history. Before the Organic Act was enacted, the senior naval officer on the island, either a captain or a rear admiral, was also the governor of Guam. In early 1950, this situation was changed, and the Department of Interior sent Carlton Skinner out here to be the governor. Carlton Skinner, a civilian. And then when the Organic Act passed, of course, the governor appointed the president appointed the governor of Guam. I don't remember. Yeah, Skinner was the first appointed governor, appointed by the president. He was not a naval governor. That was the whole point of the Organic Act. However, there's a little something in what you say, because when you read the Supreme Court's decision on the governor's quarantine powers, it's a pretty well-written decision, and they go all the way back through the Naval Administration showing that quarantine and quarantine regulations, etc., had always been under the purview of the governor. And that carried over, that was a carryover from the military government of Guam, and it stayed in place in the Organic Act, and it's still the law. So there might be a similar point here, that at the time that the Organic Act was enacted, the governor of Guam was not a naval officer. He was a civilian, but he was appointed by the president. So you could probably figure if he's appointed by the president, confirmed by the Senate, the draftsman of the Organic Act figured when Congress appropriates money, let it go to him instead of to them, right? But of course, in 1970, we changed that, and now the governor is appointed, no more appointed governor. But Jim got it wrong. The language has existed since 1950, and it's possible that the intent of the time from Congress was to assure that the naval governor held authority over how federal funds could be appropriated on the island. However, we are now in 2021. Jim got that one right. And it's time to modernize some of the provisions of the Organic Act. The request is not exclusive to just spending of our ARP funds, but any general appropriation provided to the government of Guam from the federal government. The legislative process would involve the inclusion of the community, as it would require a public hearing. It would also open the opportunity for the legislative branch to work cohesively with the executive branch to serve a mirrored objective. Where has he been? Further, that's probably the worst, the best argument in favor of leaving it the way it is, right? Further, it would promote transparency and checks and balances, both of which seem to be missing in the equation with the first CARES Act and now the AARP. Considering that only Congress has the authority to amend the Organic Act, and hence this recommendation, I would like to request for your consideration in addressing this concern and providing the Guam legislature the authority to appropriate federal dollars provided to Guam on a general level. I will be reaching out to my colleagues in the 30s. Why don't you just talk to them, Jim? To consider a resolution which I plan on introducing to attain not only the public's input, but also the position of senators on the issue. Are you going to ask the governor? I got a feeling I know what her answer would be. While the CARES Act and the ARP funds are certainly a genesis of this letter, amending the Organic Act when it comes to providing the legislature more authority with federal dollars certainly has some long-term benefits for the island community, particularly from a transparency perspective. I look forward to enhancing this discussion with you and appreciate the opportunity to present our requests. Thank you very much. Well, nice try, Jim. But I've got some things here that I want to share with you. First of all, there is something that you could do. You don't have to just bend over here and say, okay, let me have it, Governor. Although that seems to be the want of the majority of this legislature.
I guess that's the position of the senators on this issue.
It is. So here's what could be done. In the long term, create the elected position of treasurer and give the treasurer the ability to handle all disbursements of the government. And unless the disbursement, meets all of the criteria necessary under law, no disbursement. And I'm going to deviate here for a second. We've jumped through all kinds of hoops to avoid a payless payday or postponing payless 2 or 3 days. This was a mistake. When we didn't have enough cash in the right account to make payday, we should not have made payday. We should have announced you're going to get your check on Wednesday instead of Friday. This would have acquainted the population with fiscal reality. But because of the cash management that the government did, stealing money, or stealing, I sound like a leftist, taking money from the Child Support Fund and the E911 Fund, et cetera, because otherwise we can't make payroll, was a bad mistake. So at the long run, we need a treasurer, and the treasurer, and then if we had a treasurer, the legislature could pass a statute that said no funds flowing to the island pursuant to a congressional appointment may be expended by any government agency without express legislative approval by public law. So the money could have come, but the treasurer would have said, I can't pay that money out because it would be against the law unless the legislature meets and gives me the authority to do it and the governor signs it. Then I could. You could do that. Now, you could do the same thing today without that elected treasurer. You just make it applicable to the director of administration. The director of administration shall pay out shall provide no funding to any part of the government with funds coming from the United States Congress absent legislative approval. So the money would come, the governor would try to spend it, the director of administration would say, I can't do it. It would be against the law. And you can crank in some criminal sanctions there. Now, if you did that, you can bet dollars to donuts that the governor would go for one of those silly declaratory judgments saying that by so doing, you've impinged on her ability to spend federal money. And it would be a close case. The government of Guam could win on that, could also lose. But it would be better than just standing around moaning and groaning saying, Jesus, we even went to an illegal closed-door meeting with the governor, And she still won't tell us what she's going to do with the money, and we got a budget to do right now.
And all I got was this lousy T-shirt.
All I got was this lousy T-shirt that said Wong versus Kamina rules.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's what you could do, Jim. You could probably lay off one of the members of your staff because you wouldn't have to crank out so many letters. You could concentrate maybe on legislation instead of letters. But that's my 2 cents worth. We should have a treasurer anyhow, and to get us away from this bad habit of cash management where we rob from Peter to pay Paul, and then after we've robbed from Peter to pay Paul, we stiff Peter. All right, so that's Moylan versus the governor. Next on the card is APL versus Matson. But let's head for Churchill Downs before we get into that.
Hafaday, this is Congressman Nicholas. Your congressional office would like to remind you that pandemic unemployment assistance is set to expire on September 6th of this year. We encourage the people of Guam to seek out active employment as much as possible, as jobs continue to remain limited, and we want to prevent hardship for our people at the conclusion of the PUA program. Thank you, and see to us, Mahasi.
This ad was paid for with official funds from the office of Congressman Michael F.Q. San Nicolas.
Hey, big news! Now you can listen to The Point on radio.com. And radio.com gives you so much more. Local news stations give you what's going on in your community, yet national news from CBS, CNN, or Fox News Radio. Take a break with one of the hundreds of music, sports, and talk stations. Love podcasts? Radio.com has thousands of true crime, comedy, kids and family podcasts, and more. Listen anytime, anywhere. On your PC, smart speakers, and a variety of connected devices. Or download the Radio.com app now from the App Store or Google Play.
So here we are, Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky. That means that we're now in the home stretch of Tall Tales. And the next item on the card here is APL versus Matson. And the title of the story that ran on the Post is Axe Fight Between Two Ocean Carriers in Guam Market Plays Out in Federal Court. You know, if I'd been writing the headlines, I would have said Matson torpedoes APL torpedoes Matson's plan. Right? Axes and ships, it just doesn't seem to mix very well, right? I can't imagine.
Maybe they're Vikings.
It could be, yeah. American President Lines LLC has sued Matson Inc. in the District Court of the District of Columbia. APL alleges this case is about Matson's alleged anti-competitive tactics. The lawsuit accused Matson of attempting to exclude APL from the markets for container cargo shipping services between the U.S. mainland and Guam so that Matson can achieve and maintain its monopoly power and profits in these markets. Now, we've talked about this before. Matson is a Jones Act carrier, and we've had more than one episode here on Tall Tales how Matson charges so much more than APL for freight, and how after Horizon Lines left in 2012, Matson engaged in a series of rate increases. And there was some thought that perhaps Matson drove Horizon Lines off the island. I don't know if that's true or not. The complaint was filed on July 28, demanding a jury trial. Bernie Valencia, Vice President and General Manager for Matson on Guam and Micronesia, said Matson supports fair competition. We don't generally comment on litigation, But I will say that we support full and fair competition in all our trade links. I say these claims are meritless, and we intend to defend against them. Surprise, surprise. APL began its current container ship service between the U.S. mainland and Guam in December 2015, court documents state. Reacting to APL's effort to compete, Matson's chief executive threatened APL with an axe fight. Wow. If it continued with its Guam services, the complaint alleges. So that's where the axe came. Apparently, somebody, the chief executive for Matson, said, hey, you guys over there at APL, you want an axe fight? Yeah, then keep serving Guam. Matson is delivering on that threat with a campaign of anti-competitive tactics that is shocking in its scope, audacity, and disregard for the law. These tactics began when Matson's disparaging APL Guam services and escalated to an array of anti-competitive actions by Matson to exclude APL from the U.S. Guam markets, the lawsuit alleges. APL also alleged in the case that Matson launched a scheme to force shippers into exclusive dealing and bundled price arrangements and has deployed an offensive of predatory threats to coerce shippers not to do business with APL. Wow. Additionally, APL alleges in the complaint that as a result of Matson's misconduct, APL has suffered substantial losses, and its ability to compete freely and succeed on the merits of its container cargo shipping services between the U.S. and Guam has been thwarted. APL brings this suit to stop the anti-competitive conduct undertaken by Matson in violation of Section 2 of the Sherman Act. Now, I have to admit that I am not an expert on the Sherman Act. It was part of the progressive era around the turn of the last century when Teddy Roosevelt, the trust buster, was president of the United States. And it does have provisions that would interdict what's called predatory competition. Now, the classic example of that that's often advanced, I don't know if it ever happens, but let's say we have large company A and small company B, both selling widgets. And A sells maybe 80% of the widgets and B sells 20% of the widgets. Price competition. They're both charging about the same price. They both make a profit. A says our market share would increase dramatically if B were out of business, and if we didn't have competition, we could raise the price on our widgets. So A, let's say that the price of widgets is $1 a dozen. A says, starting tomorrow, we're going to sell widgets for 50 cents a dozen. So everybody says, I'm not buying my widgets from B anymore. I'm buying my widgets over there at A. And A does a lot of business. They may even lose money in the process. But in the process, it gets to the point where B says, we can't do this anymore. We're going to get out of the widget business. We're going to close up, or, you know, if they hang on long enough, maybe it'd be a Chapter 11 or something like that. But anyhow, if A could be successful, B goes out of business. A says, yes, that's what we were hoping for. The price of widgets now is $1.50 a dozen. So A increases market share and profitability in one swell swoop. Or is that pronounced one fell swoop? I like the first one better. And one's
First one was good.
And one swell foop, right? Yeah. So that's an example of predatory competition. Now, that's not what's going on here. That's not what is alleged and going on here. This is a little bit more, the allegations here are a little bit more pernicious. That, according to this article here, Matson is telling customers, you better not go with APL. Because if you go with APL, and APL doesn't treat you right, or we won't treat you right, or something. I don't know. I'm going to see if I can get a hold of some of the moving papers here so I could speak with more authority on this. But obviously, it's a really important issue because almost everything that we need comes aboard a ship. There is some air freight, but shipping is extremely important. And just speaking on general principles, if you only have one shipping company that's protected by the Jones Act rules, prices are not going to be as low as they would be if there is a second shipping company that has one of the 60 non-American, non-Jones Act slots to serve the island, which is APL. And APL, from the information I've seen, is much more aggressive in its pricing than Matson is. So if Matson is not going to lower their prices and they want to maintain market share, they got to do something else. And according to this article, the something else is an antitrust violation. So I'm extremely interested in this, and obviously I will be following it for a long time. Next, I've got the Pope versus Cardinal Bessieux. It's long, and it's one of those that I don't want to start unless I could finish it. So another Joe, if you want to talk about eviction, this would be a perfect opportunity for you to dial 888-TALK and say, Uncle Bob, can we talk about eviction? And I'd say, of course, another Joe. I'm waiting for that light to go on, another Joe. Okay, while I'm waiting, I'm going to go through the Facebook post for today. And we've got Rico Blancaflor, Henry Manglogna. I wonder if I guess Henry's still here. Apparently the reception for Tall Tales is better here than it is in Barstow, so I could see why he'd want to stay.
Join your rules.
Yeah, join your rules. And then Rico wants to know, are we in P-Corps 4 yet? He's been asking that question since the get-go, right? Brad Wood says, hi, kids. And then Brad Wood says, shall not be infringed. A Second Amendment buff, just like me. Yeah, if you've memorized the Second Amendment, Jose, you might be a tailgater. Yeah. And if you can't wait till 4 o'clock to arrive, you might be a tailgater. And if you listen to the music at the end of the halftime show and conduct the orchestra, you might be a tailgater.
That's completely true.
And if you really hate to see Fridays come around because there's no tall tales over the weekend, you might be a tailgater.
That's a definite.
Yeah. So I guess anybody could be a tailgater, even if they're not symptomatic, right? All they got to do is tune in to 93.3 at 4 o'clock on Monday through Friday. And if you aren't passing that word along to your friends, I hope they don't find out, because they're going to think, is he really my friend and he hasn't told me about Tall Tales? All right, we had Gregory Kaiser tune in and say, have a great week. Kenny Williams displays 3 American flags. Good call, Kenny. And Sherry Uriarte says the something seems to have brought back the red.
Remember those pictograms in school called a rebus or reboot? How do you say the word? Where pictures replace words. They put them together. Well, she was working out in her yard, but she did a lot of pictures of what happened to her, and the red ants got to her.
Oh, okay. Well, one thing the tall tales really can't do much about is red ants. Black ants, yeah. Red ants are too tough. Yeah.
Have you heard the history of the critical ant theory?
No. But
We'll
they're all for the red ones, right?
Yeah, well, back in 1855.
Yeah. I had a critical aunt once. I speak about her on Tall Tales of Lead. It's Aunt Florence. No matter what the situation, Aunt Florence had a pithy saying for it, right? Yeah.
Those critical ants.
Yeah. Aunt Florence. Okay, so back to the Facebook here. Let's see here. Brad Wood, thanks for sharing, Brad, but you're not going to make prime time with that comment. Peter Santos pointed out before, those are words my grandparents never used. Modern invention tomorrow. The words for rainy season and dry season that I had such a hard time pronouncing because you don't ever hear them, right? Okay, so we made it to the end of the show. We'll be back tomorrow with more Tall Tales. See you then.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
They say he's got to go. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News.
Are you now calling on him to resign?
Yes.
President Biden leading a growing list of Democrats calling for the resignation of New York's Governor Andrew Cuomo after allegations of sexual harassment were found to be credible by a state investigation.
Investigators released a 165-page public report, including testimony from the 11 accusers, interviews with 179 current and former employees of the governor, and 74,000 pieces of emails, text, and pictures. The report concluding Cuomo fostered a toxic and abusive workplace where he inappropriately touched women and made sexual remarks. One of Cuomo's accusers, Charlotte Bennett, tweeting, "Resign." But in a pre-recorded message, Governor Cuomo defiantly denied the allegations. Cuomo's lawyer then released an 85-page rebuttal to the independent investigation.
Fox's Brian Yennis, several state lawmakers joining the calls for Cuomo's resignation, including the Speaker of the Democrat-controlled State Assembly, who says they will look to conclude our impeachment investigation as quickly as possible. Governor Cuomo says he will not give up without a fight.
I welcome the opportunity for a full and fair review before a judge and a jury, because this just did not happen.
And the governor says he will not resign. The Centers for Disease Control reimposing a moratorium on evictions in counties with substantial and high levels of spread of the coronavirus. That's most of the country. The new ban extends into October and could trigger a new court challenge. The Supreme Court last month refused to strike down the moratorium because, at the time, it was set to expire in just a matter of days. Wall Street Tuesday, the Dow rose 278 points, NASDAQ up 80. The S&P 500 gained 36 for a new record close. Early morning Dow futures are down about 30 points. Asian stock markets closing Wednesday mixed. America is listening to Fox News.
Jason in the House, the Jason Chaffetz podcast. There is always someone doing something stupid somewhere. Dive deeper